Today on Independent Wrestling Profiles, we're talking with the Barn Burner Van Landon. I start everybody at the very beginning. I think it's the most plausible place to begin. If you're a wrestler, it goes to say that you started as a wrestling fan. So when did that start in your life? When did you discover the industry?
Oh man. So discovering the industry is, for me, quite literally as young as I can remember. Growing up, I moved around a lot. And so despite many concussions over the years, I can still piece together, where I was at certain times in my life and what I was doing and things like that. And so where I lived at the beginning of my life, a little village called Coldwater, I was, shown wrestling for the first time by my dad, who of course is a huge wrestling fan, still is, big supporter. But I remember specifically, this would have been the early 2000s for me. And so at this point in time, we have a PS1. I'm playing WWF SmackDown, and I'm like, I don't know what wrestling is, but meanwhile, I do know what wrestling is because I know who all these guys are. I remember one of my early birthdays still, same around that time period. As a birthday present, a kid got me wrestling figures. And wrestling figures were not something that I had even started to dive into. But lo and behold, that was going to spark a new obsession for me in life as well. So as young as I can remember, seeing like the late stages of the Attitude Era, pre-2002, was really my first exposure to pro wrestling. And I'll be honest, Matt and Jeff Hardy really, really connected with me, of course, even back then. And that carried through for years and years to come. Still huge influences of mine. But yeah, really, thanks to my dad, who was just watching wrestling and doing his own thing, I was exposed to it and just like, whoa, what is this? And especially nowadays, little kids and stuff, they get their fixations and it moves pretty quickly, 1 week it could be, Labubu. Next weekend it could be Marvel superheroes. You never know what kids are going through. But for me, wrestling stuck. And I didn't go back. Up until that point, I'm just a little kid, playing with dinosaurs, playing with Tonka trucks, things like that. It was like, no, once I found wrestling, that was it for me. Now I'm just like more. And even back then, my father's childhood collection of the old school LJN wrestlers got passed down to me. So whenever I was at my grandparents' house, I'm learning about literally like the legends of wrestling, like King Kong Bundy, Corporal Kirshner, Hogan, Beefcake, Bulldogs, you name it, Heart Foundation. And they're telling me the history of wrestling. And at this point, I'm still like 4 or 5 years old. And I mean, really, those factors just catapulted me into the obsession that is my love of pro wrestling.
I don't know how important it is to the conversation, but I'm curious. You got some action figures for your birthday, and you weren't a fan at that time. So I can't imagine that they were hunting for figures of, oh, he likes this wrestler, I'm going to get him. Do you remember which figures they were, and were they actually performers that you ultimately ended up liking or disliking?
That's okay. So the latter half of that question is fun. Okay. So it's interesting. And I'll be honest, I am on the hunt to try and rebuy this action figure 2-pack. That was my first gifted action figures way back at the birthday party. I even have in a photo book me unwrapping it and holding it in my hands for the first time. It was none other than a Titantron SummerSlam 2-pack Jakks Pacific of Test and Bradshaw.
Oh,
And this is like post acolyte Bradshaw, like not drinking beers yet, but also not painting the chest Bradshaw. So sort of just like floundering, and then big shiny silver pants Test. And while I can say that I became way, 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 way later on a fan of Test because I just sort of felt he was very underappreciated for his time. I can't say I'm the biggest Bradshaw fan. I like the APA there. That's fun, but Bradshaw on his own, maybe not for me. But that was the original 2-pack that kickstarted my action figure obsession.
that's awesome. Yeah, because you never know what you're going to get. It's a birthday party. You could have been any figure. And I agree with you. APA Bradshaw was great. Wasn't as fond of the wrestling god Bradshaw. Just didn't do it for me. Or I guess it would be more fair to say JBL at that point.
Totally.
So you said that fandom never went away. There was no period in time where it was like, oh, I'm in middle school, I'm in high school. It's not cool to like wrestling or anything like that. You were a fan right from the start. When during that fandom did the idea in the back of your mind start to hit like, maybe I don't want to just be a fan. Maybe one day I want to be a wrestler.
I will say probably around 10 years old was when that really started to solidify in my mind. Just because, as my brain's developing, I'm starting to like see things differently. And at this point in my wrestling obsession, I somehow was privy to VHS tapes like Beyond the Mat. Even WWE was releasing tapes called like Before They Were Superstars. And so at a young age, I was watching these like, oh, wait, you can become a wrestler? It's not just something that like happened. Like there's no prerequisite. Like, oh, wait, you just go and train and then that's how you do. And then you work up. And I'm like, what? So once I discovered that concept, it took me a few years to discover indie wrestling beyond that, though, which opens a whole nother door. But I'm just like, oh, wait, you can train to become a WWE wrestler. And and at that point, I was pretty hard locked into that. I remember there were numerous occasions where I would be, in school, in class, whatever, and you would get asked, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And like wrestling was always one of the options. And I would remember teachers would be like, you got to pick something else. You got to pick something else. You can't do wrestling again for your project or whatever. But hey, little did they know I would be following suit on it. And that was exactly it. It was just a drive to pursue the passion. And as I grew up and discovered more and learned more and saw the opportunities out there, it just became even more real for me. So
That's awesome. Now you had mentioned it wasn't until a little bit later that you actually discovered indie wrestling. Do you remember how you discovered indie wrestling? Maybe the first show you went to and what impact that had on you towards your motivation and inspiration towards the industry?
absolutely, I do. So up in my little small town of Aurelia, we do not get wrestling. And I mean, there's not really good enough venues for it, but it makes sense. So for forever, my exposure to pro wrestling was stuff I saw on TV or the internet. So like looking up like Ring of Honor, OVW, things like that around this point in time. And this would have been 2008 through 2010. And it's 2010 where I discover indie wrestling because a local independent show comes to my town, first time ever. And it's at the local high school, and on the card is Brutus the Barber Beefcake. And I need big air quotations for this. Doink the Clown is going to be there.
Okay.
Yeah. And Tatanka. And they're being advertised for this show. And I'm just like, what? Like, these are legends coming, like Brutus the Barber Beefcake. I'm literally looking at it right there. I have Brutus's LJN, and it's autographed on the back from Brutus. because I'm like so young. I'm like, what do I bring to the show? Like, I don't have an action figure of Brutus to get signed, but I got the LJN. You think he'll sign it? So I got that signed. But we go there, and then of course those are just the three names I talked about. But I'm exposed to Ontario Independent Wrestling. The first match of the night was a three-way between the Black Serpent, whoever that was, under a mask, one of my all-time personal favorites, Johnny Wave. Shout out Johnny Wave to everyone who knows him. And then get this, because this just brings everything full circle. The final competitor in that three-way, Rip Impact.
Wow.
Yes. and then so that show happens, and of course there's all of the local guys and stuff. I get to see Brutus cutting and strutting the hair. A surprise appearance from X-Pac, literally
What?
unannounced. They just hit DX music and X-Pac hits the ring. I jump out of my seat like I'm losing my mind, like it's a WrestleMania Money in the Bank cash-in. Is what I'm doing. I'm freaking out. So it had a huge impact on me just going to this show. I'm like this is in a high school gym. What do you mean? Like, it's not, fireworks and big stages and pyro, but boy, did it connect with me. And I remember going home and on SmackDown versus Raw 2009, who am I making? I'm creating in the Creator Wrestler, Rip Impact, Johnny Wave, Anthony Darko, Jake O'Reilly, all these guys. I'm making them in my game now because I'm like, these are real wrestlers that I just saw, and now I want to use them in my game. And once I discovered that independent, then I got online and I'm Googling like Rip Impact, Johnny Wave, looking them up. I find the Ontario Independent Wrestling Elite website, which was literally like a roster page. It's where I discovered Evil Uno for the first time. Like, all these names that were at their infancies of their careers in some cases. And I was just all in on the ground floor even then. And once I found it, I stuck with it because, of course, I love Canada. I love Ontario, so I got a little bias towards all of us. So I was just following everyone's careers, learned about the different independent promotions, A1, Smash, things like that, and was hooked. You couldn't get me away from it after that.
Man, that's awesome. And then to think years later, you would have your own cage match page. You would be appearing on other companies' websites to be like, this is full circle. This could happen. Somebody could be now Googling your name and looking you up. I wanna ask you though about the Trigger event. Okay, so you are a fan. You are contemplating becoming a performer in the back of your mind. What is that switch that causes you to pursue it? Actually, go into a wrestling school or Google it or however it came to be that you actually started that journey into training.
It was so many things, but it was my determination to prove, myself right. I had been claiming all this time, I'm going to be a wrestler. I'm going to be a wrestler. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And then when it came time to walk the walk, not just talk the talk, that's really what it was. So I wouldn't say there was one specific indie event or anything like that I went to that really turned it on for me. But once I hit 18 and now was like legally old enough to train and had a car on my own and things like that, all of the sort of cards were falling into my hands to make it happen. And of course, I get connected to Rip Impact, who was hosting a seminar up at the Barrie Wrestling facility. He let me know about his school, the Hamilton Pro Wrestling Academy. I took a bit of time to get some things settled, but it was March of 2019 when I officially joined the Hamilton Pro Wrestling Academy. Up until that point, I had probably done about 2 or 3 years of like monthly in-ring seminar stuff, just signing up with no like actual experience, just to get into the ring and try it. And once I did that, I knew I was hooked. I was like, I'm running the ropes and I want to do it again. I'm taking bumps and I want to come back and do more. Like it didn't scare me off. I said, no, this is exactly what I thought it would be and what I wanted it to be. This is awesome. So 2019 was when I made it all happen. Started driving down twice a week to Hamilton to get properly trained, and from there, you know, that's the birth of Van Landon.
All right, so let's explore a bit of that training. You started out your first couple weeks, days, whatever you want to say. What kind of feelings and emotions were you experiencing? What was coming natural to you? What was perhaps maybe a bit more of a challenge that you had to work a bit harder on to overcome? Like, just take me through some of your experiences getting into that training proper.
Definitely. Um, so greatly enough, I remember the first time that I went down to the school. I had met two guys prior to going to the school, and they told me that like they trained there. We sort of hit it off. This was up at one of the Barry wrestling seminars. And those two names you may be familiar with, Travis Moore and Wade Allen. So I met them two before I even joined the school and said, "Hey guys, like I'm coming down next week." And they told me they didn't believe me. They said, "Yeah, we'll believe it when we see it." So they didn't think I was actually going to show up. Sure enough, I'm there the next week, and it's sort of uh, not the beginners class, but like the we're getting there class, the intermediate level, not the advanced, not the beginner, the intermediate level. And I'm in there with guys like Travis and Wade, Tyler Arrow, Johnny DeLuca, Mike Forte, Jax Williams. That's sort of my class. And of course, at the beginning, I'm this complete outsider. I'm not even from the area, let alone have anything really in common with these strangers at this point other than wrestling. But that's what it is. Wrestling it's that common thread between all of us. So I would say at first, like I was a little shy, a little hesitant to really like uh, make friends or like be open and things like that. But when you're in an atmosphere with fellow wrestling lovers just like yourself, it's real easy to open up. And now all those guys I would consider really, really close friends. And a lot of it's through that time at training together. But beyond that, like the actual wrestling and the abilities and things like that, I had an amateur wrestling background in high school that I brought into professional wrestling. It's watching things like the before they were superstars on Kurt Angle, where it's like, oh, he was an amateur wrestler. I guess that means I'm going to sign up for it. And I got a couple of medals to prove that I was decent at it as well. Made it to OFSA. And, and so I came in with like a basic skill set and like ability. I wasn't like tensed or locked up or anything. So I could roll, I could bump, I could run, I was agile. And so for me, I would say the biggest hurdle was understanding it through the mind of pro wrestling. Because when you begin, you think it's just move for the sake of moves. But there's so much more. There's the psychology, and there is the why we're going to be doing something, or the why we should do something this way. And I think you are always continuing to learn that, but especially at the beginning when we would put together, practice matches or things like that at the school, that was where, you would just go in and like I said, do moves for the sake of doing moves. But then you would get critiqued, and that's when things would start to make sense. Well, why'd you do this here? And you don't have any good reason. It's like, okay, well, cut that out. If you want to do something like that, do it at the beginning. If you're going to do some, things like that. So learning the the whys, the hows and the whys we do pro wrestling, not just the physical ability and the moves and things like that. That was the biggest sort of hurdle to get over. Once I got that, like I said, you're still always learning with it, but it started to make a little bit more sense to me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you came in with an amateur wrestling background, and like you said, it's a constant evolution, learning that the ins and outs. One thing that I am curious about, which is also an ever evolving thing in the industry, is character work. Even if it's not necessarily what you ultimately became to portray, did you have an idea, even that early in the back of your mind, like, this is who I want to convey in the ring? This is who I want the fans to think of when they think of Van Landon? How did that start and how did that evolve?
I love that. So so Van Landon actually, yeah, it didn't Van Landon itself didn't come until much, much later. Believe it or not, there was a lot of iterations of Van Landon that came beforehand, and you're absolutely right. For me, even going back to like before I even started training, I was always coming up with characters. What do I want to be? What character do I want to possibly portray in wrestling? And so my first original name, way, way back, and if I ever debut for Backyard Pro, you know which name I'm going to be bringing out, was CJ Star, which was like an AJ Styles meets 3 count sort of hybrid. Very strange stuff, but that's what I was going on. There was going to be actually more of like a hippie style gimmick at one point, peace, love, and all things like that, where I was going to be Landon Neal. So there's Landon. That's where that one started to come in. But then I was like, I don't really like that. And then the real deal Landon Neal was going to be an option. And I was like, I don't like that either.
I kind of like it.
And then so what ended up happening was Landon was always a name I was going to stick with. It's a name that I love. And I'm on record saying my firstborn child is likely going to be born with that name as well, just because I rock with it. But where the Van came from is a little bit of a fun story, because there's a UK band that I vibed with real hard. They're called Catfish and the Bottlemen. Very strange name, but I'm a strange cat myself. And their singer, who had quite a persona, who was just, a rock star through and through. His name was Evan, but he shortened it to Van, and he was Van McCann. That was his name. And I thought, wow, Van McCann, like what a cool like ring to it. And I got the privilege to meet him a handful of times, and he was a big wrestling fan. And it was at one point there where I was like, you know what? Why don't I just take his name? Like, it's rocking. I'm rocking. I want to bring the energy that he brings to the stage. I know that's the character that I'm going to portray, is like this high energy guy. So I'm one of the times I was meeting him, I was like, yo man, like, I'm a wrestler and I'm using your name. I'm Van Landon. And crazily enough, and there is footage of this, he shouts me out as he's performing one time, dedicates a song to me. He goes, shout out to Van Landon. That guy's a wrestler. it's so, I'm losing my mind, but it was so cool and it was so fulfilling. And really, once he did that, that set it in stone for me. Yeah, I am Van Landon. I registered the name on Twitter in like 2018 or something, like had it way back then, like before I'm even debuting. I locked in my handle because I'm like, I got to make sure I get it. Can't have somebody else come in and take it. So, and that was the birth of Van Landon's, the name and the character of me just turning it up, going wild, sort of starting as the dirt bike high energy guy. Now I'm wearing trunks and taking things a little bit more seriously, but it's all still that high energy barn burner that I've always been.
Yeah, so a little bit of a shift to high energy intensity. I love it. I love it. So I want to step back again towards like the more training side. First match. I always love to find out what somebody's recollection or experiences of their first match, who their opponent was, how it came to be, and maybe how they felt actually finishing it and the feedback they got.
So my first official match in front of fans anywhere was at the Tottenham Street Festival with, of course, HPW, the Hamilton Pro Wrestling Academy. And Tottenham, it's like a Coldwater. It's just this weird middle of nowhere little village type of town. Has this rockin' street festival, and it would have been in July of 2019. So keep in mind, I had started training in the March, but had some experience prior to. So we're going March now to July. And Coach Rip, he reaches out and says, "Hey, we're doing the street festival. Do you want to come and do it?" And I'm just like, "I've never wrestled. Like, what do you mean? Like, I don't even have gear. I don't have music. Like, what? I don't know what I'm doing." And it all came together really quickly. I threw together like a few options of like possible gears. One was almost like a frat boy style thing, khakis and like popped collar and stuff. I'm like, oh, now that I'm thinking about it, why did I even pitch that? One other one was like me in my literal amateur singlet. Shout out Jurgen, who sort of does the similar thing nowadays right now. And then the other one was just like, I'll be honest, a Darby Allin ripoff. I was a big Darby fan at the time, so I just stole his thing with like tights under shorts. But it worked. It worked for me. It worked for the time. It worked for a kid with no gear. So it was fine at best. It was not good though. So we roll up to the Tottenham Street Festival, and I was also, so I got the gear. I had to get the music. I was like, well, what song am I going to land on? Sure enough, I picked a local Toronto band. I love my Canadians. They're a band called Pup. They have a song called Old Wounds. It's just heavy. It just punches you right in the face right from the start. That's what I'm all about. So I said, okay, this is going to be it. And sure enough, that's been my theme song ever since. I get there. We're literally wrestling in the middle of the road on this ring. Our locker room is behind a building. Not like tucked away behind a building, just like sort of around a building. Very open. And my first opponent ever is indestructible Evan Greenaway.
Oh, okay.
Him and I, of course, we were training together at HPW at the time. Him obviously longer than I had, and he was like, "I want to be Van's first match." And he insisted on letting me win. And I was like, no, come on, man. And he's like, no, it's your first match. Like, you're winning. And there is footage of it. I do have the full match. I technically did 2 matches that day, but my first match was me versus Evan. And of course, we just like throw all the bells and whistles. I'm pretty sure I hit a sling blade at one point. Like, we just, it's a street festival in front of people that just so happen to be watching us as they walk by, and we're beating the heck out of each other like it's my WrestleMania debut, right? Like, I'm going all in with it, running around, getting the people going, and like I said, we're in the middle of the road. And I love wrestling because it takes you to some really awesome places, where the venue is like unmatched, but then you also get these very intimate moments like a street festival or a Canada Day or anything like that. And so, yeah, my first match, it honestly went off without a hitch. I can't remember like flubbing anything too bad or anything like that. And we get to the back, and yeah, they were just all impressed with me, very happy. Everybody clapping me for being like, "Hey, you did it! Like, there you go. How was it?" And I just remember being on cloud 9. I got tons of photos from that day too. Like a locker room shot of all of us, all the HPW guys, all of us hanging out, and it was very much a brotherhood. Of course, this would have been 2019, so 6 years ago, which is crazy to think about, but we were all there, all hanging out and just supporting one another, because at the end of the day, the wrestling brotherhood, that's all we are, is just support for one another.
That's awesome. That's so awesome. Now, I've had the pleasure to interview every member of Empire, and I've asked them all the same question, which is going to include yourself as well. Is can you tell me in your words how it came to be that you joined Empire?
Yes, absolutely I can. And I love being a part of Empire because it is something that I never thought I would be doing in a stable, in a faction that is pretty well regarded across, anywhere you look here in Ontario. And so exactly that. Uh, my story on joining was at HPW. Myself and another gentleman by the name of Shane Silvers, we were the tag team Young and Reckless. And we actually fought Empire's Matt and JT countless times. We were always wrestling those two. And somewhere in there, I think something must have clicked with either Matt or JT, where they're just like, okay, there's something here with Van Landon. So fast forward a few years, we're looking at, I want to say, the end of 2023 or sort of mid 2023. And it's PWO, Pro Wrestling Ontario. They were using Van Landon, but at the time, Van Landon was just the solo act, the barn burner, the dirt bike pants, high energy guy. That's all I was. And I was beginning to find a ceiling for that character. And like a perfect storm, I get a call from Matt Grant and says, "Hey, no pressure. Would you want to join Empire?" And legit, I just respond, yes. I didn't ask why. I didn't do nothing else. I'm just like, yes. And then I was asking questions, but the first answer from me was yes. And he said, plans are changing here at PWO. Crystal Moon's doing her thing. And we're going to need a third man for the trios division. And we want you. And I'm like, me? Like, what? And there's like, yeah, no, we know you're solid. We know you're rocking. Like, we think you're a perfect fit for it. And I said, thank you. I'm absolutely on board. And from there, we've gotten to do so much fun stuff at PWO. Originally, when Van Landon joined, it was quite the shock. Got to do the mask reveal. It was the first time Van Landon had ever been a bad guy, too. So very fun stuff there. We've done a multi-team 6-man ladder match, which was absolutely nuts. We just have yet to capture those trios titles. That's our one fault. We keep coming short on there. But yeah, Matt reached out to me and said, "Do you want to join?" And without hesitation, I said yes.
Well, I'm glad you did because you guys clearly have a great chemistry. I know I was lucky enough to get to see you guys recently up against the Uprising, and the stuff that you guys did in the ring, it was like you'd been wrestling for decades together. It was absolutely fantastic. Now, pivoting away from marking out about you, I do want to ask you, what are some of the highlight moments that you've had in your career? And I'm not saying just like best matches. It could be milestone moments. It could be a fan interaction that just kind of blew you away, or maybe even a chance encounter with a name that you wouldn't have expected, and you had to kind of almost push down that version of yourself that was freaking out when Xbox showed up and keep your composure and say, yes, hi, nice to meet you. But like, what are some of the big moments that stand out when you think about your career?
Oh man, yeah. I cherish each one of these moments too. So that's why, because if wrestling ended today for me, these are my memories that I can live with for the rest of my life. I have these. The biggest one that comes to mind by far is I won the Three Pistols Championship at Barry Wrestling. We had a year-long feud, myself and Von Vertigo, who is an absolute top talent wherever he goes. Shout out Von Vertigo. We put together this great feud that culminated in this huge main event match where I won. I had so many of my family, friends, people close to me in attendance for that one. That one, is pretty untouchable for like a huge moment for me. But beyond that, even some crazy milestones, some places that I never even thought I would reach. I wrestled in the United States with Empire, which stay tuned because you never know when I may pop back up down there. And like that was huge. I never even thought that could ever be a possibility. But there you go. I've wrestled in the United States, which some people will never get that opportunity. So I'm so grateful for that. Um, a small but mighty milestone for me personally. I hit 1,000 followers on Instagram. Little old Van Landon, the character that I made up for pro wrestling is popular enough to gain 1,000 followers. So that was a huge one for me as a social media, marketer background that I actually do have. That one was very fulfilling for me. I got to do C4, which I never thought I would do. It was the first and only time I got to go out to Ottawa there, and me and Rajan Husher, who is another close friend of mine, tore it up, beat the heck out of each other. And to be able to just say that I wrestled in that venue is untouchable. Like, I couldn't believe that. So those have been a lot of great things. In terms of what you said, that X-Pac moment, that like, what is going on? I haven't gotten to tie horns with anybody that I've necessarily like had their action figure or anything with growing up. But the real full circle moment for me, I did at Caleb and his Bucket Full of Wrestlers 2. I had a ladder match where the gentleman who inevitably kills me in the match was Rip Impact. He punches me off a ladder. I go through a ladder, and I'm just like, I'm thinking back to myself, 10 years old, when I had just seen Rip, in the gymnasium at that show, creating him in my video game, playing with my action figures. I was always a crazy kid doing ladder matches and stuff like that with my action figures. And I'm like, did I really just get put through a ladder by the guy who trained me, got me to this point, but also was the first match that I saw at my first ever indie show? That's just storybook to me. And wrestling gives you a lot of very, very cool opportunities. And I just try to cherish as much of it as I can, because at any moment I could not be wrestling, right? So those are a bunch of my favorites right off the top there.
I appreciate the mentality, and I love the sentiment of, at any time this could be over, and I have to appreciate what I had. Hopefully it's not over. And provided that it's not, what are some of the bucket list items that you still have on your list? Whether they be a performer you'd like to get into the ring with, a company that you'd still like to work with, or even maybe a destination you'd like to travel with. It doesn't have to be, end game kind of stuff here, but what are some of the smaller bucket list items? Where would you like to see Van Landon next?
So I would love to expand across Canada now, because like I said, I've dipped my toes in the United States, but I have not dipped my toes in the Pacific Ocean, I think, or Atlantic Ocean. I think I'm going the right ways there. Please don't get at me if I'm wrong about that, folks. You know how much I get dropped on my head? Regardless, I would love to go out east, out west, and wrestle for some companies out there. I want to get Van Landon big enough in Ontario that the juice is worth the squeeze for these companies. that they feel like I'm worth it to use out there. And whether or not I could steal the Empire rub off of my boys to maybe bring them out with me would make for quite a fun trip. So expanding across Canada is a bucket list goal. Obviously, main event in WrestleMania and winning the title, I think, is a stretch one in there. But I digress. Yeah, doing things like that. I would love to uh, just continue to evolve Van Landon. More recently, he's been doing things a little bit more dastardly than usual, and that is completely new territories for the old VL. So expanding upon my range and not just being the happiest babyface you've ever seen, but to really dive into the darker side of Van Landon. I want to see where that takes me to. So short term, I'm excited to expand that character and see where that goes. And then bucket list. I mean, like I said, there's been a few promotions that I've gotten to sort of dip my toes in with, but I would love a proper chance to try out Smash Wrestling. I love what they do down there with their shows. I think they run great shows. There's a wrestler who looks very much like me, but he does not wear the same stuff as me, who at one point had a match at Smash Wrestling. His name is, if I recall correctly, it was in all caps for some reason. It was just Corbin. I'm not sure who that was though, but he had an opportunity at Smash one time. But I would love for Van Landon to have a real show out at Smash Wrestling. One of my close personal friends, Jax Williams, he's doing great things down there. Maybe I got to go shut him up.
A new opportunity to test out your dastardly ways.
Right?
Okay, so don't limit yourself to reality. I can wave a magic wand and put you in the ring tomorrow with your dream opponent, as long as it's someone still lacing up their boots, not historical figures. Who is that matchup against?
Ooh, it would have to be me and Jeff Hardy. If you ask me that any day of the week, Jeff's my first answer 100%. And I would eat that swanton. Oh, it would hurt so much. Oh, I know. I already know it would. But boy, would I be happy to take that from him. But Jeff Hardy, for sure, is there. Kurt Angle would have been a nice choice, but he's not lacing up still. Claudio Castagnoli, he's a big influence on me, of course, in AEW now, but when he was Cesaro was when I was introduced to him, and I was just blown away by him. I'm a huge fan of his. And then maybe Billy Gunn. I'm a big fan of his as well. I would love to wrestle Billy Gunn. He's doing great stuff with Maple Leaf Pro. Which backtracking, Maple Leaf Pro, they're on that new bucket list as well too. But Billy Gunn, I've always been a fan of him. Literally, with the exception of Cesaro there, all three guys that were on my WWF SmackDown on the PS1 way back in the day, those are guys that I would love to wrestle if we could wave that magic wand.
Wicked. All right, so I ask everybody this question in closing, and it's not always the easiest. If you had an opportunity to go back and talk to a younger version of yourself who was contemplating getting into wrestling or just starting into the training, what piece of advice would you give yourself that could also possibly be of value to somebody who is on the fence today?
Yep. What would I go back and say? I wonder what I would actually go back and say. But as I'm thinking right now, definitely it was advice that I got very, very, very early on from a wrestler that, like, oh my God, does it ever still hold true? And that is cardio, cardio, cardio. Like you can be a wrestler, you can be the strongest guy on planet Earth, but if you can't last 10 minutes of doing up and downs and left and rights and down and ups and things like that, wrestling will be very difficult for you. And so I've always been a big cardio guy because of that. So I would say, hey, get to the gym, keep running, keep lifting, keep doing those things. But then beyond that as well, I would say track your matches and take photos, because Van Landon didn't do either of those things and he regrets it immensely. I took a few photos, but not enough. And probably from 2021 to 2023, I don't have any written down of what I was wrestling, who I was wrestling, where I was, things like that. So to genuinely take that part of it seriously as well, because it's a nice memento to have. And then any other advice that I would give myself? Yeah, I would say invest in gear sooner than when I did.
Be ready when you get that call with gear.
Yeah.
So before we sign out, can I just get you to once again tell the audience who you are and maybe where they can find you online if they want to add to that 1,000 followers?
Absolutely. I am the Barn Burner Van Landon. You can get me pretty well everywhere at the Van Landon. TheVanLandon at the Van Landon. And that is Facebook, X, TikTok, Instagram, Blue Sky Social, Twitch.com, and even Patreon. You name it, I'm on there. Find me.
That's a lot of links to put in the description for me. Thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
This was so much fun. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Independent Wrestling Profiles. Please help out the show if you can with a like, subscription, or review. We'll see you next time.